Hi, I'm Brother Jake. Now, there are a lot of people out there who say that the Mormon Missionary Program is a self-serving system for maintaining a brainwashed sales force for the LDS Church, but that's not true at all. Let me explain. But first, I need to give you the rundown on what Mormon missionary service is and why it's so important. See, Mormons believe that we have a responsibility to share the gospel, which is something I described in an earlier video, with people all over the world, just like Jesus told his apostles to do. So back in the early days of the restoration of the church, Joseph Smith would tell people God wanted them to go to a bunch of different places to preach and teach about Mormonism. Anyway, that tradition continues today with the Mormon Missionary Program, where young people can pay out of pocket to leave their friends and family and go to a specific location to preach about Mormonism all day, every day, and it's totally voluntary. Well, kind of. See, here, listen to one of our super cool modern prophets explain it.
We affirm that missionary work is a priesthood duty, and we encourage all young men who are worthy and who are physically able and mentally capable to respond to the call to serve. Many young women also serve, but they're not under the same mandate to serve as are the young men.
Exactly. It's not like you get kicked out if you don't serve a mission. Missionary service is just a divinely mandated priesthood duty that God's living mouthpiece on earth is specifically encouraging young people to fulfill, which they can then choose to righteously accept or selfishly ignore completely of their own free will. Well, some young people are encouraged. Like the prophet said, since serving a mission is technically a priesthood duty and only guys get the priesthood, which totally isn't sexist like I've talked about before, only young men have the duty to serve a mission. Young women can serve a mission if they want to or haven't found a husband yet or whatever, but they aren't really expected to, per se. That way they have the option to stay home and prepare to become a faithful wife and mother and to strengthen their home and family. You know, lady stuff. So starting at age 18, actually it's just 18 for young men. Young women can go when they're 19. Well, it used to be 19 for men and 21 for women, but that changed a couple of years ago, which is a great example of why having prophets who can give us modern revelation is so awesome. Anyway, the point is that starting at age 18 or 19, people can serve a mission for 2 years. Well, 2 years for men, it's a year and a half for women. Yay, lady stuff. Anyway, to go on a mission, first you have to be interviewed by your local priesthood leaders to make sure you have a strong enough testimony of the gospel and you keep the word of wisdom and you haven't had premarital sex and you don't do other stuff you shouldn't do, and he fills out a missionary recommendation, which then gets sent along to the missionary department, where an apostle, I think, gets divine inspiration to assign each and every one of the thousands of missionary applicants to one of the missions throughout the world that just so happens to need new missionaries at that particular point in time. Isn't that cool? Once the missionary is assigned, they get a letter in the mail that tells them which mission they're going to, and they could be anywhere. Well, not anywhere. There aren't like missions in North Korea or anything, but a lot of places. So the first place every missionary goes is called the Missionary Training Center, or MTC. The main one is in Provo, Utah, but there are other ones in different parts of the world so that missionaries from, not America don't have to fly to America just to start their mission. In the Missionary Training Center, you spend every waking moment learning how to be a missionary by going to a bunch of seminars and classes that tell you what you should tell people and how to get them to promise to do things they might not otherwise promise to do from a super awesome manual called Preach My Gospel. After leaving the MTC, missionaries then go to their assigned mission and report to their mission president, who's the person, well, just the guy, because only guys can be mission presidents, in charge of all the missionaries, and he assigns them to a specific area and a companion, which is like a buddy that helps them preach the gospel and keep the mission rules, because, well, there's kind of a lot of rules. See, here's the deal. Being a full-time missionary is a very special calling, so they have to live by a special set of helpful life pro tips so that they're as effective as possible. I mean, you wouldn't want to be a lazy bum and waste your time and money out there, right? Anyway, like I was saying, missionaries live by some special guidelines, which are all listed out in a handy-dandy notebook that they carry with them all the time. So the special tips are like only contacting your family via weekly emails through the church's non-private email server and twice yearly half-hour phone calls, or only referring to themselves or other missionaries as elder for male missionaries or sister for female missionaries instead of by their, actual first names, or following a strict daily schedule of missionary activities, or only wearing business formal attire all the time, or only having conservative hairstyles and not having facial hair, or only reading books on the approved missionary reading list, or only listening to music that your mission president approves of, or never watching TV or DVDs except for the ones authorized by your mission president, or going to the movies, or listening to the radio, or getting on the internet except to email your family while your companion can look at your screen, or not using headphones, or never going on dates with or flirting with people, or never being apart from your companion for any reason ever at all, except for the bathroom, which includes sleeping in the same room, but not in the same bed as each other. Probably so they don't, you don't, never mind, you don't need to know. Now, at this point, some of you might be thinking, but isolating impressionable young adults from their support network of friends and family and then imposing strict rules that literally strip them of their identity and control every conceivable aspect of their lives from the people with whom they communicate to which information they can consume is a textbook example of how totalitarian organizations like cults ensure the obedience and loyalty of their adherents. But it's not about controlling people, and Mormonism is definitely not a cult, like I've already said. It's about helping missionaries be as effective as possible. These kids came out on a mission from a sincere desire to help make the world a better place, and God needs them to be focused so that they can be gospel spreading so they can be really good at helping people learn about God's true church and improve their lives. Think about it. Would you be able to access God's power if you're focused on a beard growing contest or spending time reading up on Brad Jelena in one of those magazines at the grocery store checkout? No way. Speaking of spreading the gospel, you might be wondering, what do missionaries do all day? Well, they have a super organized daily plan. Every morning they get up at 6:30 and get ready for the day. Then they spend 1 hour studying from the approved missionary library and then another hour studying with their companions so they can be better at telling people about Jesus and stuff. After all that, they spend all day, except for 1 hour for lunch and 1 hour for dinner, from 10 a.m. till 9 p.m. proselyting, which is when you might see them riding bikes or walking around or knocking on your door week after week after week or whatever. And sure, 2 hours of study followed by 11 hours of preaching every day might seem like a lot, but it's not like they have to do it every day. On Mondays, missionaries get something called a preparation day, which means that from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m., they can do other things like all their grocery shopping and laundry and write that weekly email to their family I was telling you about and write handwritten letters to their friends and do all the other non-preaching, non-TV or DVD or movie watching or internet surfing or non-approved book reading or non-approved music listening stuff that they want to do. And even if it still does seem like kind of a lot of time, proselyting, that's because that's the whole point of being a missionary. It's about blessing people's lives with the gospel. Gosh. Anyway, because missionary work is so important, missionaries also keep meticulous track of all the things they do while they're out teaching people. Like, here's an example. Let's say the missionaries talk to you on the street on like a Tuesday. When they do, they'll make an appointment for, Wednesday and write down your information in their daily planner. Then, after they visit you, you become an official investigator, which means they take your information and fill out a teaching record, which is a piece of paper that has your name and address and which specific gospel principles they taught you and which promises they helped you make using all those special commitment strategies that just so happen to be similar to high-pressure sales techniques from that manual I told you about earlier. Anyway, that teaching record then gets put into something called an area book, which is a big folder that the missionaries use to keep track of all the people they're teaching. Then on Thursday or Friday, they'll have a 2 to 3 hour weekly planning session where they talk and make goals about each person they're teaching, like you, and come up with ideas about how to get you to keep learning things about the gospel and keeping commitments so you can be baptized, because really that's kind of what they're going for here. But if you're not down with that, don't worry, just let the missionaries know and they'll get rid of your teaching record. Well, they won't get rid of it technically, but they'll take it and they'll put it all the way in the back of the area book. That's just in case some other missionaries want to come by at some point in the future and make sure you still don't want to go to super VIP heaven to do cool God stuff with your family for the rest of eternity. Then, every Sunday, each companionship takes the goals they made in the weekly planning session about specific stuff, like the number of people they're going to meet, and the number of lessons they're going to teach, and the number of investigators that they'll commit to being baptized in a specific date in the future, and how many of their investigators are going to attend church, and the number of investigators who are going to get baptized, along with their weekly performance on those goals, and then report that to their mission leaders, who are missionaries, well, just male missionaries, but, yay, lady stuff, assigned to be in charge of other missionaries who pass the information up to the mission president. And yes, the fact that missionaries are explicitly instructed to orient all their activities around making goals and reporting progress within a rigid leadership hierarchy on specific numerical metrics might make it seem like the Mormon missionary program is hijacking young people's sincere desire to sacrifice their own time and money to serve their fellow man and directing it into a corporate sales process, especially when you consider the fact that every single one of those metrics seems to focus missionaries toward recruiting people into the organization as opposed to directing them toward activities that are less institutionally self-serving, like, helping provide people with access to food or clean water or shelter or clothing or medicine or education or addiction recovery or counseling or any of dozens of other resources. But that ignores how awesome the gospel is. Missionaries are there to help people come to Christ through his one true church, and that's going to improve their lives way more than food or shelter or whatever. Think about it. Which do you think is better? Spending all your time solving people's temporal problems like what they'll eat or where they'll sleep or whether or not they get malaria in this short, tiny, insignificant life, or making sure they get a legit baptism so they can do cool God stuff for eternity in super VIP heaven. If people live the gospel, all that other stuff will take care of itself. You got to think about the big picture. man. Plus, I think we're missing an important point here. The missionary program isn't just to help investigators live the gospel, it's there to help the missionaries too. They can learn valuable life skills like how to get off their behinds and work hard, and some of them might even learn a new language depending on where they go. And yes, I can see how the benefits of missionary service could be a bit mixed, since by taking young people and isolating them from their friends and family, replacing their identity with an institutional title, placing them in a rigidly hierarchical leadership structure, giving them dozens of rules that govern every aspect of their life, and then bombarding them with messages that their obedience to those rules can influence the life choices of other people, forcing them to orient their every waking hour around a series of weekly reported numerical metrics, and training them to interact with people in ways that appear suspiciously similar to high-pressure sales techniques, the church could be creating an environment that may be a tiny bit competitive or stressful, which may explain the prevalence of mental and emotional breakdowns among the missionary population, but that's okay, because if you're having a tough time or you have residual guilt from a sin that you didn't exactly repent of before you went out on a mission, thereby staining the sacred calling of a missionary with your uncleanliness and deceit, you can always just go home. No big deal. I mean, sure, it might be a little awkward to come back early, since because of how strong the expectation of missionary service is, well, for dudes anyway, but, yay, lady stuff. And the fact that you have to move away and stop communicating with your friends and family when you leave, everyone pretty much knows exactly when you left and exactly how long you're supposed to be gone, so if they see you walking around before then, it'll be pretty obvious that for some reason or another you just couldn't quite hack that sacred duty the prophet asked you to do and was assigned to you by an apostle of God, but that's missing the bigger picture. The most important benefit of missionary service is that missionaries gain a testimony of the church and the gospel at a time in their lives when it's really important. Lots of people fall away from religion in their early adulthood and miss out on blessings like super VIP heaven, and that's a tragedy. But missionary service can help alleviate that risk. So the missionary program isn't a self-serving totalitarian system of indoctrination meant to engender the fealty of members when they're most likely to reject it. It's a loving program that helps young people gain a testimony at a difficult time in their lives. And while they're at it, they help other people live the gospel and get to super VIP heaven and do cool God stuff. It's a win-win. So, you see, not self-serving or controlling at all.